Well, hello there and welcome to Travels with Geordie. If this is your first visit, my name is Peter Knowles and I live on this classic wooden motor cruiser currently here in Vancouver, British Columbia, along with the loving memory of my pup Geordie, all the while fixing up for some pretty ambitious cruising. If that's the sort of thing that you might find interesting, please consider sticking around and subscribing. I'd love to have you. And well, with all my guests departed, it's time to get back to work. I've been going on the bright work, which has been, well, long overdue. And of course, carrying on with the upper helm, which I was missing some tools and materials to carry on with, which I have secured. So jump right back into that, get done what we can. As always, I'd like to send a big thanks to my Patreon and PayPal supporters. And as you all know, it's you that keep the show going. Thanks ever so much. Well, yes, sir, it's back to work, and it begins with a bit of a tidy up and an organization and filling all those little old bolt holes in the cabin tops. And they're only really temporary. Anyway, I'll explain more in a minute. This is only a band-aid to get me through to when I can re-glass these decks. Massive, massive project. Hopefully next year. Okay, then first things first, I want to reroute this eased edge. I had intended to make a 1/4 inch round over here, and the only bit I had was 3/16, which is really, really too small. So I have procured actually a 3/8 round over bit, which is a little bigger than I wanted, but I'm actually quite happy with it. The stock is 1 inch, that gives me plenty of room for the Rabbit on the backside for the glass. So again, more routing, more chips, more worrying about end grain problems. First, just a light sanding to make sure this is silky smooth for the router base. Again, because it's a much bigger bit, we're going to take this in small bites. And safety glasses, of course. And as I head for the deepest full cut, I must do a test to make sure there's no shoulder. Alright, I am much, much happier with the more substantial round over. That will just catch the light so beautiful when that gets some varnish. Okay. In my enthusiasm, I forgot to sand it, and yes, this tongue well can make for a bit of a sticky ride. I am really, really pleased with that. Okay. And now for the more terrifying work. Again, here there's some end grain work, so I have to be super, super, super careful. Thus the multiple step trimming. You'll see me trying to do this sanding with the grain, especially at the joints. it's not actually that crucial at this point. Any sort of what you may see as scratches in this is really only in the oil, and I'm not actually scratching the wood at all. I could re-oil this right now and it would look perfect, but it's just a habit I have. Alright, so here comes the stressful part. If you were watching along a couple of weeks ago, you might remember that I thought I was going to run this huge, big-ish rabbiting bit in my little trim rotor. But of course it's a 1/2-inch shank, and the trim rotor will only take 1/4 inch. Enter my big Bosch, basically full-size router, which is primarily for use in my router table. And it's a beast, no doubt about it. I very rarely freehand with this machine. Not that there's anything wrong with it, it's just big and heavy and bulky. So let's set it up for a couple of test cuts and see how that goes. I'm sure it's going to be just fine. Okie dokie 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 dokie. This is a plunge router base, so that's partly why it's so big and bulky. And as before, I'm going to take successive shallow cuts. Yeah. Well, first pass has gone brilliantly. Okay, so the whole point of this particular step is to be able to provide a rabbet for the glass. Now I can't drop the glass into it just yet because there's still a radius at the corners from the router bit, which I'll chisel out later. But if I put it near the end, it does drop into the slot in that direction, in this direction, in that direction, and in this direction. Therefore I can conclude that the glass is going to fit. Let's take another terrifying bite. And on we go. And on to the scary pieces. Whew, so far so good. Oh, I am so glad to have that out of the way, and it is just so perfect. Well, I can tell you the glass is going to fit in here perfectly because it hasn't been cut yet, and it will be cut custom to fit in here perfectly. So here comes the controversy. You'll notice that the Rabbit is not very deep, and that is because I'm not actually going to set this glass in here with a wood trim piece to hold it in place and to trim it off. I'm simply going to bed it in a Sikaflex product, yet to be determined, and then glaze it in with that same black Sikaflex product, very much the way windows were glazed 100 or 100 years ago. If you've ever lived in an old house, you'll know that the small panes of window were held in place with a putty, a linseed putty. Perhaps you've replaced such windows after perhaps breaking them as a young child. Anyway, I certainly did. So the controversy is, yes, you're going to see a little chamfer of black rather than a piece of wood trim that I believe would look fairly shoddy in fairly short order in a boat that lives outside. Now let me remind you that this boat does not get to live in a shed year-round and go to shows now and then. It's going to live outdoors for the rest of, well, the rest of the time I own it anyway. So I have to make some concessions to ongoing maintenance because of the extreme weather and sun it's going to have to be able to contend with. and I'm thinking this is a fair compromise. I'm sure I'll hear about it in the comments if you don't agree, and feel free to. One other thing I have to deal with is an ever so slight misalignment in the bevel of the front edge of the windshield where they meet in the middle. So I'm just going to take the power plane and just skim the pointy side off just the hair. That'll do it. Likewise, the ends of the side panels. One more dry fit confirms that these angles are now just about right on, and I can now make the same correction to this outside edge and put a round over on this edge. Now, because there's a bit of a bevel on this edge, the router bit wheel won't make a perfect round over on here, but it'll get it a lot closer, and I can just sand it fair a little bit when I do the final assembly. And a refresher coat of oil to seal up all the areas I've just cut. Today I'm using a different brand. Normally I use the Lee Valley brand of pure tung oil. Today I'm using, it's called Island Teak, True Teak Oil. However, it's about 95% tung oil. The balance apparently is some actual oil extracted from the processing of teak. But anyway, it's a reasonable source, at least in British Columbia or Vancouver Island anyway, of relatively pure tung oil. The advantage of it, it's slightly thinner, and it won't gum up as much as the previous coat did, because I really don't need it to build much on here. I'm only just tidying up the little areas that I've already cut into. All right. And well, there you go. That wraps up re-oiling, and in a couple of hours I'll rub off any excess. Now, to be fair, there's not all that much more work I'm going to be able to do in the next little while with this upper helm windshield assembly, and the reason is mostly because the next steps would be to attach it to the boat. And well, you can probably tell that the boat is not ready for that to happen. Part of the main reason for that is that this extension to the upper cabin top is not done yet. And well, there's a terrible mess over here where the old upper helm was, and well, in general, I think you can all see that the next major job for MV Geordie is redoing all the cabin tops and the decks and the side decks. In other words, everything that had been fiberglassed is pretty much trashed. There's some areas that are worse than others. There's some areas with really significant damage underneath. So thankfully, I now have access to a shed. So over this winter, these projects will be, I won't say a piece of cake, but at least possible, because it's not the sort of work you could do outside. So I'm very, very much looking forward to getting it done. I am not at all looking forward to doing it. I think probably the 7-week haul out last year would be 10 times more rewarding for the amount of work put into it than fiberglassing cabin tops. It's not something that I have any particular skill in, and I despise fiberglass and epoxy in general. So anyway, all that to say that carrying on with the upper helm, there's not much more I can do until the cabin and the boat is ready for it to be affixed, and that's some time off. Now, there's lots to do. One of the things you can see, this sad old mast, which was only ever really to be a mock-up for something and a temporary. I'm going to pull that apart right now. That mast, which was attached to the leading edge of the windshield, the final mast will not go there. And the main reason for that is this lovely canopy, which the gulls in False Creek have decided to start to shred and of course plenty of pooping on. Some of you despise it and some of you tolerate it, but this whole canopy arrangement will be completely different next year, and I'm pretty much finished the design for it, and I think you'll like it better. But the main thing that's different about it is that it will fold down, very much like a more modern bimini, although it won't look like a modern bimini because I can't stand them. The point is, it needs to be able to fold down onto the main cabin top and just past the windshield, and as a result, the mast can't be here. The reason I'd move the mast back from, well, you can see where it used to be, or that scar in the middle of the cabin top, was so that I could have a large expanse of cabin top for future solar. However, I've laid out all the solar panels I want, and if I return the mast to its original position, I can still make it all work. All that to say, this is no longer a mock-up for a meaningful mast. It's got to go, get some tidied up. This is going to be off pretty soon. The season is drawing to a close. It's early September, and I'm going to be heading back over to the island and getting some work done on Zephyrus in the next little while. So we're sort of shifting gears, and you can sort of feel it. There's something about Labor Day. As soon as Labor Day passes, starts to feel like fall. Although it's pretty nice today. Well, hello and welcome to the Travels with Geordie Beer of the Week, coming to you again from beautiful downtown Vancouver in False Creek, where it is really starting to fill up and get quite busy for the Labor Day weekend. All right, let's jump straight into the beer. Local brewery, Steel and Oak, S&O, and this is their Frolf Hazy IPA. Well, you knew it would be a hazy IPA, didn't you? Because I do tend to like them. Okie dokie. Well, what a week. It's been a bit real world, kind of back to reality, very tangible what real life is like without the fantastic company of Caitlin and David. If you've been following along, you know that my daughter and her now fiance came to visit over the last week, and it was really such a great visit, and it was so much, well, it was like family is what it was, and to tell you the truth, I've been sort of missing that. So it was a lovely, lovely visit, and I'm lonely. I am a little lonely in Utopia. Cheers. Frolf from Steel and Oak. That's exactly what I like in a hazy. Holy moly. I realize a great segment of the population, especially many of you in the UK and perhaps Australia, despise anything resembling a hazy, but it has that little tanginess without being, that's really good. Just slightly oh, it's excellent. So good, so good, so good. All right, so pretty straightforward with the paperwork this week. Last week's winner of a Travels with Geordie during the week bonus episode. Sorry, the winner of during the week's bonus episode t-shirt was Russell Clark. So congratulations and cheers to Russell. Get a hold of me and we'll make sure you get your shirt. I'd like to thank a new patron that came aboard, David Calloway. Thank you ever so much, David, and so glad to have you aboard. Cheers. And that's all there is to that. As I said, it's kind of been a strange week. Got lots done, mostly bright work, to tell you the truth. I've showed you the work I've done at the upper helm because, well, bright work is not all that entertaining, but some of it, and when we get into the cockpit next week, is going to be a little more interesting. I'm going to try and fix up the lockers finally so that they're on hinges. But it's long overdue, and I just caught it. I mean, I just caught it. Anyway, I'll be another week or so in here in Vancouver, and then back over to the island to see some friends and carry on with real life. Again, I returned to the Empress Hotel, our marina downtown, on October 1st, so it's kind of wrapping up the season. Feels quite real now. So the Travels with Geordie word of the week is going to be tangible. Yes, tangible. It came to me as I was setting up, and I'm sure you can do something with it. For those of you who know what to do with it, go right ahead. For those of you who don't, just write tangible in a sentence. There you go. That's all you need. Cheers. See you next week. These guys are kidding, right? Anchoring, it's not rocket science.